never believed in ghosts before 2017. I used to laugh at people who swore they saw things that weren't there. Shadows, figures, presences. I was a firm believer in logic, in things that could be explained. That was before the night I stepped inside the old Mercy Hill Hospital in rural Tennessee, a building that hasn't seen a living patient in over 20 years. At that time, I was a 25-year-old freelance photographer. Urban exploration was my thing. Abandoned buildings, rusted factories, forgotten schools. I'd crawl through dust and decay to capture the haunting beauty of places left behind. When a fellow explorer named Drew told me about Mercy Hill, I was instantly intrigued. He said the hospital had closed in the 90s, after a fire destroyed part of the East Wing. Supposedly, some patients never made it out. The state had sealed it up, but people still broke in. Rumors spread that lights flickered in empty wards, that you could hear a nurse calling for help in the dark. It sounded like internet nonsense, perfect for photos. We arrived at around 10 p.m., which was typical for us. The goal was always to go late, less chance of being caught by security or nosy locals. Mercy Hill was a sprawling, 3-story building surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusting ambulances. The windows were mostly boarded up, and the emergency sign had faded to pale red letters that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Drew handed me a flashlight and we climbed through a broken side door. The air inside felt wrong, thick, heavy. It wasn't just dust or decay. It felt pressurized, like stepping into a sealed tomb. My camera strap rubbed against my neck as I adjusted it, and the faint echo of our footsteps carried unnaturally far down the hallway. We started in what used to be the main lobby. Old wheelchairs were stacked against the wall, and a shattered reception desk stood in the center. I snapped photos while Drew checked his EMF reader, device he liked to bring along to detect energy. Used to tease him about it, but that night I didn't. Something about the silence kept me from making jokes. After half an hour, we reached a locked metal door marked Ward 9 Restricted. There was yellow caution tape across it, but it had long since fallen apart. Drew looked at me and said, "That's the fire wing. Nobody ever goes in there." Naturally, that made me want to go in. The lock was weak, and a few hard kicks were enough to break it. The door opened with a moaning screech that echoed through the corridor. Ward 9 was pitch black except for the faint beam of our flashlights. The walls were scorched, blackened with soot, and the ceiling tiles hung loose like rotten teeth. A burnt hospital bed sat in the center of the hallway, half melted. That's when I noticed the temperature drop. My breath started fogging, even though it was early summer. We kept going deeper. About 3 rooms in, I saw something that made me stop. A hospital bracelet, still looped, like it had once been around someone's wrist, lay in the middle of the floor. The name on it was barely readable. Eleanor Whitmore, room 913. The ink was smeared, but the date read April 3rd, 1996, the year of the fire. Drew whispered, "Dude, that's creepy." I laughed a little, trying to stay calm, probably just a prop someone left, but inside my stomach twisted. I pocketed the bracelet. That was my first mistake. We decided to find room 113. It wasn't hard. The room numbers were still painted on the doors. When we got there, the door was half burned, but still hanging on its hinges. The smell hit us before we even looked inside, like burnt plastic and something sweet, like rotten fruit. The flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing an overturned bed, a melted IV stand, and walls blackened by smoke. The fire had eaten through the ceiling tiles, leaving exposed metal ribs. And then, right as I raised my camera, I heard it. A soft tapping, like fingernails against metal. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. "Drew, you hear that?" I asked quietly. He nodded. His EMF meter started chirping, lights flashing red. "Something's moving," he whispered. I aimed my flashlight toward the corner of the room, and for a second, I thought I saw someone standing there. A faint silhouette of a woman in a hospital gown. Then the flashlight flickered and she was gone. "Let's get out of here," Drew said firmly. I didn't argue, but before we could leave, my camera, which had been hanging by my side, snapped a photo on its own. The flash blinded me for a second, and when I looked down, the screen showed an image that froze my blood. It was the room, same angle I'd been facing, except there was clearly a figure standing by the bed. A woman, long hair, gown open at the back. And her face? It was blurred, stretched unnaturally, like she was moving fast while the picture was taken. I didn't take that photo. We ran. I don't remember most of that sprint. Just the sound of our shoes slamming against the floor, and Drew shouting that his flashlight wasn't working. We reached the main hall, panting, when suddenly all the hallway lights flickered on for half a second, just long enough for me to see someone standing at the end of the corridor facing us. And then, darkness again. We bolted through the same door we came in from, not even looking back. Outside, the night air felt like oxygen after suffocating. Drew leaned over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. He kept saying, "I told you, man. I told you nobody goes in there." We drove back in silence, both shaken but pretending to laugh it off. That night, as I was uploading my photos, I noticed something strange. The picture my camera took on its own, the one of the woman, had changed. In the corner of the room where she had been standing, there was now an empty bed. The timestamp was the same, but the figure was gone, replaced by a smudge of black smoke. I thought maybe I'd misremembered, that maybe my fear distorted what I saw. But when I zoomed in, the metadata clearly showed exposure 0.00, flash fired, auto. I hadn't pressed anything. I deleted it, or at least I thought I did. 2 nights later, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint tapping sound. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. Coming from my closet, I sat up, heart pounding, telling myself it was just a sound from the pipes or the window. But then I saw something that made my chest seize. On my desk, next to my computer, lay the hospital bracelet, the one from Mercy Hill. I swear on my life, I had left it in my camera bag. The name Eleanor Whitmore was darker now, the ink fresh, like it had just been written. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move. When morning came, I took the bracelet outside and burned it. I quit urban exploring after that. Drew and I never went back to Mercy Hill. A few months later, I tried to look up the hospital records. There really was a patient named Eleanor Whitmore admitted in 1996 for respiratory distress. She was listed as one of the fatalities of the fire in Ward 9. But the weirdest part, her death record was dated April 4th, one day after the fire was officially extinguished. She shouldn't have been alive then. I still take photos, but never of abandoned places. And sometimes when I'm editing late at night, I still hear it faintly from somewhere behind me. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. And every time I whisper under my breath, "I'm sorry, Eleanor, I shouldn't have taken your bracelet." When you're a med student, you spend years surrounded by death, textbooks full of it, classrooms that smell faintly of disinfectant, and labs where you dissect bodies that once belonged to real people. You learn to shut off the part of your brain that screams, "This used to be someone's mother, or brother, or child." By my 3rd year at the University of St. Louis, I thought I'd mastered that detachment until the night we broke into Greystone Asylum. It wasn't supposed to be a ghost hunt. It was supposed to be a dare. Stupid, harmless fun after too many hours buried in cadaver labs. It was Marcus, my roommate, who started it. He was the classic loudmouth, the kind of guy who laughed during anatomy lectures and flirted with professors for fun. One Friday night after exams, he said, "Hey, let's see how brave the future doctors really are. Greystone's only 20 minutes away." Everyone groaned at first, but after enough cheap beer, the idea didn't sound that bad. So 4 of us went, me, Marcus, our friend Lena, and Chris, who was the quiet, responsible one. Greystone was an abandoned psychiatric hospital, shut down in the 80s after a scandal about patient abuse. The building was a monolith of cracked stone and broken windows, surrounded by forest. People said it was haunted, that nurses went missing there, and that patients were buried in unmarked graves behind the east wing. We parked off a dirt road around midnight. The moon was bright enough to see the outline of the hospital through the trees. Its roof looked like jagged teeth against the sky. Marcus kicked the back door open like he'd done it before. "Welcome to the operating theater," he said with a fake British accent. The smell hit us first, an old rot mold, rusted metal. The air was colder inside, the kind of cold that seeps into your lungs. We used our phone flashlights and made our way through peeling hallways. The walls were lined with rusted wheelchairs and overturned gurneys. Faded signs still hung on the walls. Electrotherapy unit, pediatrics, surgery. Lena was recording everything for TikTok, whispering commentary like she was hosting a ghost show. Chris walked behind us, clutching his backpack like he wanted to leave already. At one point, we reached a heavy double door that said surgical ward, authorized personnel only. Of course, Marcus grinned and pushed it open. Inside was a massive room with steel tables, overhead lamps, and cabinets filled with shattered glass jars. The walls were lined with faded x-rays, still clipped in place. The surgical lights above the tables hung like metal spiders, and the floor was littered with papers that disintegrated. When we stepped on them, "This is where they did the lobotomies," Marcus said dramatically. "Slice, slice." "Shut up," Lena hissed. "You'll get demon-possessed or something." Chris was staring at the far corner. "Why are those lights still on?" We turned. One of the surgical lamps above a table was flickering faintly, even though there was no power. "Probably the phone flash reflecting off something," I said, but even I didn't believe it. Marcus walked toward the table. "This must be where they—" He stopped mid-sentence. "What?" I asked. He leaned closer, squinting at something on the table. "Dude, is that blood?" We crowded around. There was a dark red smear across the steel, fresh enough to glisten under the light. "That's not possible," Chris said, his voice tight. "There's no power, no running water, no—" A metallic clang cut him off, like something had just fallen in the hallway behind us. We froze. Marcus whispered, "Probably a raccoon." But none of us moved. Then came another sound, the high-pitched screech of wheels, slow, steady, echoing down the hall. A gurney. I felt my pulse climb up my throat. "Someone's here," I said. Marcus tried to sound tough, but I could see his jaw tightening. Let's check it out. We peeked into the hall. The beam of my flashlight landed on an empty gurney. Old, rusted, one wheel jammed. It rolled about 2 feet forward before stopping on its own. I turned my light toward Marcus, about to say let's leave, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring down the hallway, toward the shadow of another figure, standing at the end. A tall man. Or at least it looked like one. He was wearing a white coat. Security? Lena whispered. No, it wasn't security. The man's head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and his arms hung stiff at his sides. Marcus took a step forward, raising his voice. Hey, we're just... The figure moved, not walked, glided, smoothly, as if his feet weren't touching the ground. Lena screamed, and the hallway light flickered, not from our phones, but from the hospital's overhead fixtures. They blinked to life for half a second, illuminating the entire corridor. That's when I saw it. There wasn't just one figure. There were 3, all in stained hospital gowns, standing motionless at the end of the hall. When the lights went out again, the air turned freezing, and from the darkness came a voice, low, gravelly, wet. Doctor, it still hurts. Lena dropped her phone. Marcus swore under his breath. Run, now! We sprinted back toward the entrance, our footsteps pounding against the tile. I looked over my shoulder once. I wish I hadn't. The 3 figures were closer now, their outlines jerking like broken puppets in the flickering light. We burst through the surgical doors and into the main corridor. That's when Marcus tripped. He fell hard, hitting his knee. Go! He yelled. But we didn't. Chris and I grabbed his arms, pulling him up. As we did, something caught my eye. The door we'd entered through earlier was closing by itself. Marcus! Lena screamed. Move! We all lunged through just before it slammed shut. Outside, the forest never looked so alive. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. We drove back to campus in total silence. No music, no laughter. Just the sound of the road and our heavy breathing. The next morning, Marcus didn't come to class. At first, I figured he was just hungover. But when I went to his dorm later that day, the door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like antiseptic. And on his desk, neatly placed in a row, were 3 hospital bracelets. Each one had a name written in faded ink. Patient 43, Patient 44, Patient 45. The strangest part, his phone was recording. I played the most recent video, the one from last night. It was shaky, mostly dark. But right before it cut off, Marcus had pointed his camera at the surgical table, and there, faintly visible in the reflection of the metal, was a man's face. Pale, expressionless, wearing a surgical mask. Not Marcus, not any of us. I called him again and again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Campus security filed a missing person report, but there was no trace of him. 2 days later, I went back to Greystone with the police. The entire East Wing was boarded up now, sealed with fresh wood and new locks. One of the officers told me it was because some kids had broken in recently, and that the city didn't want lawsuits. But when I asked if they'd found anyone inside, he shook his head. No, just one weird thing, he said. When we opened one of the surgical rooms, all the lights turned on at once. For about 3 seconds, and then nothing. He paused before walking away. Funny thing though, when they shut the power off here in 1985, the wiring was removed. There's no way those lights should have worked. That was 7 years ago. Marcus was never found. I finished med school, but I quit practicing medicine last year. Every time I walked into an operating room, I'd get flashbacks. The cold air, the gliding figures, that voice whispering, "Doctor." Sometimes when I pass a hospital at night, I catch my reflection in the window and see something behind me, a man in a white coat standing perfectly still. And every time I close my eyes, I can still hear Marcus's voice echoing in my head. The last thing he said before the lights went out, "Guess I found my patients."